let's dive right into this explainer. Look, we've all been there at some point, right? That incredibly frustrating feeling of just struggling to get ahead. Or worse, feeling like you're failing while everyone around you is just effortlessly cruising by. But what if I told you that your struggle isn't actually a lack of ability? What if, honestly, it's just a simple miscalculation of your environment? Today, we are going to unpack the ultimate playbook for figuring out your natural strengths and, more importantly, how to make sure you're playing a game where the odds are naturally stacked in your favor. Albert Einstein actually hit the nail on the head when he said, "Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid."
The core point here is just absolutely crucial. You aren't inadequate. The truth is, we all have completely unique strengths and talents. But if you evaluate someone using a metric they just aren't naturally equipped for it, they are going to fail. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it's going to think it's broken. You aren't broken. You're just playing a game where the rules are working against you. I mean, think about a highly energetic kid being forced to sit perfectly still at a desk for 8 hours, or a wildly creative adult stuck in a rigid data entry job. They aren't failing because they lack genius. They are failing because they're fish trying to climb trees. So, here is our step-by-step playbook for winning the game of life. First, we'll talk about how to stop climbing the wrong tree. Then, the explore-exploit trade-off. Third, finding the clues to your natural talents. Fourth, creating your own unique game. And finally, mastering your favorable environment. All right, let's jump into step 1. Stop climbing the wrong tree and find your flow.
It is absolutely critical that you find this specific arena where your inherent strengths are actually rewarded. Picture Diego Maradona for a second. He's widely considered one of the greatest soccer players in human history, right? But imagine if early in life, Maradona decided he was going to be a chemist, or, I don't know, a heavyweight boxer. Would he have achieved world-class success? No way. He probably would have been a profoundly average, or maybe even terrible chemist. And this applies to all of us. Sure, you can theoretically force yourself to do just about anything, but in practice, you are infinitely more likely to excel at the things that just come naturally to you. It's like a chain reaction. When you pick a habit or a career path that aligns with your natural wiring, it creates this powerful, self-sustaining loop. Because the task is inherently a bit easier for you, you experience success faster than the people around you. That success brings praise, it brings satisfaction. You stay energized because, well, you're making progress where others are pulling their hair out. And that satisfaction propels you to produce even higher quality work, which leads to better opportunities. Pick the right habit, and progress feels easy. Pick the wrong one, and life is just an endless uphill battle. Moving on to part 2, the explore-exploit trade-off. This is all about managing trial and error. Look, figuring out your talents through trial and error before you run out of time is crucial. Life is short. You literally cannot try every career, date every person on earth, or play every instrument. To manage the limited time we have, we use this trade-off. In the beginning of any new activity, you have to cast a really wide net. That is the explore phase. You try a ton of possibilities. But then, once you find a winning solution, you shift your focus almost entirely to that one solution, and that is the exploit phase. And this framework applies to practically every situation you'll ever encounter in life. Think about childhood. A kid should spend their early years trying soccer, piano, drawing, whatever. That's exploring. But once they hit high school and realize they have an absolute golden arm for baseball, they exploit that specific talent to get a college scholarship. Or take a young adult. The explore phase is casual dating, meeting different people to learn what you actually value. The exploit phase, committing to the best partner you found. In business, it's called split testing. You run 10 different cheap ads to see what clicks, and then you pour your entire budget into exploiting the one ad that actually drives sales. So to put a hard number on it, the most effective long-term strategy is to dedicate about 80 to 90% of your time to exploiting what already works, and 10 to 20% to exploring new things. Google famously did this with their 80-20 rule. They asked employees to spend 80% of their week doing their official primary job, exploiting their skills, and 20% exploring passion projects. And guess what? That 20% directly led to blockbuster products like Gmail. By the way, quick tip, if you have a lot of time, like if you're fresh out of school, lean heavier into exploring. But if you're on a tight deadline, you better exploit the best solution you have right now. Okay, part 3, clues to your natural talents. Let's do a little introspection. We know we need to explore, but how do we actually identify our natural advantages instead of just waiting around for lightning to strike? Well, you have to ask yourself 4 highly targeted questions. Question 1, what feels like fun to me but feels like work to everyone else? This is a massive clue.
True talent isn't just about what you love, it's about the tasks where you can handle the pain and effort way easier than the people around you. Think of someone who gets genuine joy out of color coding a massive, messy spreadsheet. To most of us, that sounds like absolute torture, but to them, it's a fun puzzle. The work that hurts you less than it hurts others, that's the work you were made for.
Question 2. What makes me completely lose track of time? You know that feeling, right? Pay attention to the flow state. Flow is that magical mental space where you are just so hyper-focused that the rest of the world completely fades away. It's this incredible blend of happiness and peak performance where people get totally in the zone. If you look up at the clock and realize 3 hours have gone by in what felt like 20 minutes, you have found something deeply aligned with your brain's wiring.
Question 3. Where do I get greater returns than the average person? Human beings are constantly comparing themselves to their peers. It's just biology. So look for the areas where you seem to get faster results or bigger rewards for the exact same amount of effort. For example, when the author of our source material, James Clear, started writing, his email list grew incredibly fast. He wasn't even entirely sure why, but he saw his results completely outpacing his colleagues. Getting that kind of outsized return early on is a massive indicator of natural alignment. In question 4, what just comes naturally to me? For a second, you really have to ignore what society tells you is prestigious, ignore what your parents expected of you, look inside and honestly ask yourself when you feel the most authentic, genuine, and alive. No people-pleasing, no harsh self-criticism, just raw, unfiltered enjoyment. Which brings us to step 4. Create your own unique game. I love this one. It's basically a real-life cheat code, the skill combination hack. What if you go through all that introspection, you ask the questions, and you still can't find a single game where the odds are stacked in your favor? Well, then you use the ultimate hack. You invent a new game. Take Scott Adams, the creator of the comic strip Dilbert. Adams openly admits he is not the greatest artist in the world. He's also not the funniest comedian. But he can draw better than most, and he's funnier than most. The magic is that very few people can draw pretty well and write pretty good jokes. When he combined those two average skills with his rare background in corporate business, he created something entirely unique. He became a top 1% cartoonist literally just by stacking average skills. Let's bring this into the real world today. Imagine a young professional who is a totally average computer coder. Like, they aren't getting hired at Google anytime soon. Now imagine they also have an average hobby of baking bread on the weekends. They aren't winning a pastry competition either. But if they combine their basic coding skills with their deep knowledge of how a bakery actually operates, suddenly they have a massive advantage. They can develop software specifically tailored for local bakeries. By combining those skills, they've practically eliminated all their competition. So the golden rule here is this: when you can't win by being better, you can win by being different. By rewriting the rules and specializing in a super narrow category, you completely bypass the need to be a genetic freak or practice for 10,000 hours. A good player works incredibly hard to win the game everyone else is playing. A great player simply creates a new game that highlights their strengths and hides their weaknesses. Think about it. A massive bodybuilder might be the strongest guy in the gym, but he'll still lose an arm wrestling match to a much smaller professional arm wrestling champion. The champion has highly specific, specialized strength. Specializing is exactly how you beat the genetic lottery. And finally, step 5. Master your favorable environment. This is the final secret. This brings us to a really profound realization about how your surroundings completely dictate your success. Think about a pot of boiling water. If you drop a hard, tough potato into boiling water, the environment breaks it down, right? It becomes soft, mushy, and weak. But if you drop a fragile, liquid egg into that exact same boiling water, the environment hardens it. It becomes tough and strong. Now, you cannot control whether you are born a potato or an egg, but you absolutely can choose to play a game where it's better to be hard or soft. Changing your environment literally changes your inherent strength. If you are a highly empathetic and sensitive person, a cutthroat corporate sales floor might be your boiling water. It is going to break you down like a potato. But take that exact same empathy and put it into a career in counseling or nursing or user experience design, and suddenly, you are the egg. That same trait makes you incredibly strong and highly valued. If you can find or build a favorable environment, you instantly transform a situation where the odds are hopelessly against you into one where you are practically guaranteed to win. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. Take a hard look at the struggles in your own life today, the places where you feel like you're just endlessly pushing a boulder up a hill. Are you actually failing because you lack the ability? Or is it simply time to stop climbing trees? Get off the land and find your ocean. What game are you playing right now? And is it time to invent a new one? Thanks for joining me, and go out there and find your favorable environment.